Let's look at some football. John McMullen from 97.3 ESPN.com. FanRag Sports NFL, their national football columnist. He joins us now on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN with our daily look at the NFL. John, yesterday we talked a lot about Andy Reid and everything that happened with the coaches there. We want to get into some of the offensive topics, best teams you ever covered. But first, you wrote about it at FanRag Sports. We just kind of insinuated in basketball, we're seeing a lot of tanking. That's a big word in the NBA. You write for football, though. Don't worry about full-scale tanking in the NFL.
Yeah, I think it takes care of itself. You know, I love that you brought up manifesto.
Hold on, John. You're breaking up on us a little bit here. We want to get a good connection, and we'll get him back. Read his article, by the way, over at FanRag Sports NFL. I'll retweet that out because, it's a big topic in all sports, Pete. Hockey, Buffalo tanked. Mm-hmm. Edmonton, right?
Yep.
Those two teams.
So Buffalo got Jack Eichel and Edmonton got Connor McDavid.
Right, exactly. Mm-hmm. So it's not just the NBA. You're seeing it in basketball too. But, John, go ahead in talking about it for football.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to overstate it. There's tanking in football. There's no question the Cleveland Browns tanked last year. There's no question the New York Jets are tanking as we speak for this season. But as far as the full-scale, multiple season, what just went on in Philadelphia, that's just never going to happen in the NFL. And I think part of it is passion of the sport and the fan base. And then the second and perhaps bigger aspect is it's not a guarantee of success in the NFL because it's more of a team game and it's not about just one player. Obviously, if you do get a quarterback, there's a very good chance you're going to be really, really competitive in the NFL. And there's certain situations, Andrew Luck being the most recent. But even if you guys look at that and how that's worked out, it was tremendous early, but the last two seasons, it's been 500 football for the Indianapolis Colts. So it's about more than just getting the quarterback. That's obviously the biggest piece of the puzzle. And it's just not a prudent way to do things in the NFL. So in that way, I think they're lucky because they really don't have to worry about it. Because teams understand they can't do that because it's not going to get them very far.
Not to mention the injury factor. If you got a team out there half-assing it on a Sunday, you can get yourself hurt.
Oh, sure. Yeah, there's no question about that. But, even in the NBA, even here with the Sixers, well, I don't think players half-ass it. I think it's about, obviously, the front office putting together a bunch of bad players. Those bad players are trying because they want to have a career in the NBA or the NHL or any other sport. So I never thought or think tanking it relates to the players because the players generally have pride in themselves and pride in what they do, and they go out and try. But in the situation with the Sixers obviously being most notable, it's obviously you put a bunch of bad players out on the floor, you're going to lose a lot of games.
Right. I mean, and a lot of people had said like the Sixers were purposely losing. They weren't purposely losing. They just flat out weren't good enough. Right. They were just flat out not good enough.
The players and the coaches weren't purposely losing. The front office was purposefully losing. I mean, they put that together to lose basketball games. There's no question about that, but you never say that about players and coaches because that's just not in their mentality. They're always going to go out and try.
Yeah, and you mentioned what happened in Cleveland. They won one game, and that was I agree with you on the football front because most years you don't know who the number one pick is, and if it's a defensive end or if it's a left tackle, that player is just not impactful enough for you to waste an entire season.
No, it's not. And I always point out this is a perfect year of that. The Cleveland Browns, you can say they wasted a season, however you want to paint it, and they get Myles Garrett, who's a heck of a prospect. But even if he develops into the next great pass rusher, a Hall of Fame type talent, the next Bruce Smith, Reggie White, whatever name you want to throw out there, and I say, JJ, look at the Houston Texans and J.J. Watt. It doesn't get any better than J.J. Watt. That is a Hall of Fame player. That is one of the best 5 defensive linemen to ever play in the history of this game. And it's very unlikely that Myles Garrett will live up to that, and that's not an insult. It's just odds are it's not going to happen. But what have the Houston Texans been able to do? They've been able to make some playoff appearances, but no serious runs, because you need more than just a great Hall of Fame level defensive lineman.
John McMullen's with us, 97.3 ESPN.com. Would you categorize the Jets then as this is their season to not put their best foot forward?
Yeah, they're tanking. There's no question about it. And they're tanking because of the quarterback situation, and they understand how bad it is in that organization. But it will be a one-year process, and then they'll move forward. Whether it's Suck for Sam, the USC kid, or another quarterback sort of jumps up to the top of the board, unless things change drastically and Christian Hackenberg turns out to be a heck of a lot better than we all think he is. The Jets will take the best quarterback on the board next season after winning 2 or 3 games or whatever they manage to do, and then they'll start moving forward. So while I say there is tanking in the NFL, and there always will be because of the draft system.
Well, a lot of times, John, a lot of times, why is his name? The guy from Shark Cuban. Man, I can't believe he's like, yeah.
Don't call him Cuban.
Right.
Mark Cuban.
Like Cuban basically said, once we were eliminated, basically we were losing on purpose. Like he admitted it, right? He came out and said, but he got to a certain point of the season where, okay, now we're not good. Now it's time to start losing. They didn't enter the season with that mindset.
No, and there are always going to be in-season tanks even in the NFL, because you're right. I mean, what is the excitement to get to from 3 wins to 4 wins, especially if it's going to cost you as far as draft picks goes and moving down the board. But the NFL has done a good job with that. And a number of years ago, what they did is they shifted the schedule, and they put a lot of divisional games late. And that makes it really, really difficult to tank, because even if you're bad with these big-time rivalries, Eagles never want to lose to the Cowboys. They never want to lose to the Redskins, never want to lose to the Giants. It doesn't matter the season. They don't want to do it. Similar in other areas. Green Bay and Chicago, that tremendous rivalry. Baltimore, Pittsburgh might be the best rivalry in professional sports. These teams don't want to lose to each other. So I think the NFL made a very, very prudent decision when they went that way with the schedule. It doesn't eliminate it because you still see it. But again, those long-term, multi-year tanks, they don't exist in the NFL, and they never will.
John McMullen's with us here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. A minute ago, John, you mentioned the Jets are targeting a quarterback in next year's draft class. But even if they get that QB, don't they need a whole bunch of other pieces too? I mean, David Carr got killed in Houston with the Texans and no help.
Yeah, I was just talking to Josh off air, as a matter of fact. I still think David Carr has more talent than his brother, but the difference is Derek plays behind one of the best offensive lines in football, and David just got beat up to the point he became like a cat, a scared cat in the pocket, because he knew the pass rush was coming and he knew he was going to get hit. He was a tremendously talented player, number 1 overall pick. But yeah, they call it the ultimate team game, and I agree with it. As far as professional sports go, certainly in North America at least, pro football is a team game. And you can have a great quarterback, and it gives you a leg up. Don't get me wrong. It gives you a big leg up. But you need far more than that to win, especially on a consistent basis. We've seen quarterbacks with tremendous consistency, most recently Tom Brady, obviously, Peyton Manning. But you have guys like Drew Brees. Drew Brees is still great. And New Orleans is 7-9, 7-9, 7-9 the last 3 seasons because there's nothing around them. So you do have to do more than just get a Hall of Fame quarterback.
Hey, John, yesterday we meant to get to this article at ESPN.com of the 30 best NFL teams over the past 30 years. So before we kind of get yours, I wanted to first get the best team that you've ever covered.
Well, personally, and we mentioned it, I think a couple of days ago, is the '98 Vikings is the team that I covered on a day in and day out basis, and that's a lot of reasons because I mentioned the best team I've ever seen in the modern era, similar to the Vikings, would be the 2007 Patriots, and that's the Patriots that didn't even win, and I compare it to. You know, people in Philadelphia will understand or should understand. If you look at that Phillies team that beat Tampa Bay, they weren't as good as the Phillies team that lost to the Yankees. And both of those teams weren't as good as the team that won whatever it was, 102, 103 games and had the best record in baseball. That was actually the best of that run of Phillies teams, but they didn't win. So, you know, there's a lot of generally people look at greatest teams and they automatically say, well, you got to win the Super Bowl to be the greatest NFL team. But I believe firmly it was the 2007 Patriots who won 16-0.
We're talking with John McMullen here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. John, I see that about 10 years ago today, NFL Europe became no more. Should the NFL look to bring something like that back or some sort of developmental league?
Well, if they're going to continue with the current system that limits off-season work, limits practice time throughout the season, yeah, I think they have to develop some kind of system that helps players who are raw and not ready to play at this level. But while I say that, it's easier said than done. It's a gargantuan task logistically. It's tough to set up. I think the league was hoping that spring football league that happened a couple weeks ago in West Virginia could do some good, and we'll see how that shakes out. But, you know, it's going to be a money pit if you try to develop a developmental league. It's not going to obviously draw that much. It's not going to have great TV ratings. It's not going to be able to print money. What it would do is tremendously help the product at the professional level eventually. And I know coaches always talk about the legacy of NFL Europe is just how many quarterbacks came out of that.
That's right. Kurt Warner, Brad Johnson, Jake Delhomme.
Yeah. And there's just not a system today where guys like that can go and sort of learn their craft and become Super Bowl level quarterbacks. And that's what happened with all three of those guys. And you just don't see it. And guys just go by the wayside because it's really difficult to get better playing that position by just standing there and watching. So it would be a great sort of tool for second and third string young quarterbacks in this league to be able to have meaningful competition somewhere, but it just doesn't exist right now.
June 23rd, 2007 was the final game, and you mentioned those three quarterbacks, Kurt Warner, Brad Johnson, Jake Delhomme, but you know me, Johnny, I like the kickers, right? Adam Vinatieri was in that league. Dante Hall came out of that league as well. Yeah, they also had elephants carrying in the championship trophy, hot tubs in the end zone, gallons of beer. I mean, it was a different kind of time.
I'm going to guess PT was a London Monarch guy.
Did that have the gallons of beer?
Or you were a Rhine Fire or a Barcelona Dragon guy?
I just know that one of our guys that's local, Doug Coleman, that grew up in Ocean City and coached one of the high schools around here and is on Bill O'Brien's staff now, cut his teeth at the in NFL Europe. That was where he
Frankfurt Galaxy
first went to try and get
there we go.
Yeah, there you go.
Wasn't there a couple teams in the United States that entered the World League, the NFL Europe? Like, didn't they try that?
They tried that in the CFL. I don't believe they tried that in the NFL Europe. If you remember, there was a Baltimore CFL team.
Right. Maybe I got them confused.
And I think a Las Vegas CFL team, but I could be wrong.
You had the Frankfurt Galaxy, the Rhine Fire, the Hamburg Sea Devils, the Berlin Thunder, the London Monarchs, the Amsterdam Admirals, the Barcelona Dragons, the Ohio Glory, the Montreal Machines.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, I thought there was the
Montreal Machines. Yeah, I guess at the very end when they're trying to save the league. I mean, that's the problem the NFL has with London right now. They would love to get a team in London, but the logistics are a nightmare, and B, I'm not sure that a European city, right now it's an event when the NFL goes over there, and it's sort of like a big party. But I still don't think that people understand what they're watching because they don't grow up with American football. So I'm not sure if it's a game that translates well, to be honest. And that's why the NFL, as popular as it is here, it lags behind basketball and hockey and certainly soccer on a world level because people just don't understand it.
People understand the NFL draft, John, and they understand it so much that now there's another player who's come out and said, we want that NFL draft here. Green Bay, I guess, has come out and said, we could host that here, and we could do it better than Philadelphia.
Yeah, well, that's Philadelphia. Hey, Philadelphia should be proud of itself because it set the standard for everybody else, and everybody's going to be chasing what Philadelphia was able to do with the draft, and that's what everyone says. Jerry Jones says it. Green Bay says it. That they can do a better job, but it's a pretty high bar, and that's something that Ron Jaworski and everyone who helped put that together for the city should be very, very proud of because everyone knows Philadelphia hit a home run with the draft.
By the way, going back to that list, that 2007 Patriots team was the number 2 team on the list. The 91 Washington Redskins were the number 1 team on the list, which is interesting because the 91 Eagles defense was the number 1 defense of the last 30 years, but now you can see one of the reasons why they couldn't get very far because the 91 Redskins were the best team in the last 30 years.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you want to go back a little bit farther, I would say the 85 Bears, most people would say that's the best team, certainly of the modern generation. I would agree with that. Certainly the most dominant team. But, you look at that 07 Patriots team, really, they were just, especially in the first half of the season, they were not only beating people, they were just putting up some ridiculous scores and numbers. It was a tremendous team, and I think if they had finished it off and put the cap on it and beat the Giants in the Super Bowl, that would clearly be looked at as the greatest team of all time, and I wouldn't necessarily disagree with it, but if you don't finish it off, similar to Golden State in the NBA last year when they won 73, I think, but they didn't win the title.
By the way, the 2001 Eagles did make the list. They came in at number 24. The one Super Bowl appearance for Andy Reid and the Eagles.
Yeah, that was obviously a very good team. There are so many, to talk about another team, 15-1. I think it was the 2011 Packers. That was a tremendous team, and that was not the Packers team that won the Super Bowl either. I think the Packers, the Aaron Rodgers Packers team that won the Super Bowl was the 10-6 team, and the 15-1 team didn't win. We saw it a couple years ago with the Carolina Panthers, who were 15-1, and obviously didn't finish it off. And then, to me, hey, I'll be honest with you. If you want to talk about greatest teams of all time, it starts with the 1970s Pittsburgh Steelers, and everybody else gets behind them.
There you go. Johnny Mack here on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. And don't forget, follow him on Twitter at JF McMullen and read his NFL national columns at FanRag Sports NFL. All right, John, have a good weekend, man.
You too, guys.